All right, what's up, everybody? Today, for the interview series, we are here with Michael Beck from the 1010s podcast.
What's
You
up,
want to
everybody?
introduce yourself a little bit?
Yep, as you said, I'm Michael Beck from 1010's podcast. We've been doing 1010's podcast we just did our 100th episode, so it's been good. We just built the studio, which is where I'm sitting now, and we're doing our YouTube. Basically, it's just a one take of our studio while we record the podcast, and we're going to be releasing that on our YouTube channel. So that's kind of where we are now.
Let's get to the first question, shall we? So, how did you get into cars?
So I grew up in a car family. My dad was an old hot rodder. So I think when I turned 12, I got my first car. So I got a '89 Thunderbird that was basically it needed a lot of work to be roadworthy, but it was free. So I started out working on that car when I was pretty young, and then not even that much after that, maybe 6 months or so, I got the '79 Camaro that I have now. So as I was growing up, I was always in the shop. I mean, my dad had a Chevelle, he had a Monte Carlo, he had some other cars too, and that was really the environment that I grew up in. So when I got to the point where I was actually old enough to do my own projects and work on my own stuff, that really interested me, and that's what kickstarted my automotive addiction.
Okay, so how did you get into doing the podcast type stuff? And also, who do you do them with?
Yeah, so
Just in case people don't know.
yeah, it's a good question. So 1010's podcast, we've been doing that since January of 2016. I do it with my buddies Adam and Robbie or Robert Tavierhout, and we are the three original members. We still do it every week. It just started out as something that we wondered if we could do because I was a huge Joe Rogan fan. I listened to the Joe Rogan Experience pretty religiously, and at the time I was traveling a lot, so I needed entertainment on the flight. And as I was listening to Joe Rogan, I thought, well, this seems reasonable for someone to do because I had an audio background. So with that knowledge, I decided, okay, let's sit down and see if we could actually record a podcast. And I instantaneously thought of Adam, and I'd kind of discussed it with him for a couple of months. You know, is this something you'd be interested in doing? He seemed very interested. And then I thought we need someone to kind of round this out a little bit because he and I we can be really obscure with some of the things that we like. So we brought Robbie in because he had a different background than we did. Adam and I kind of have vintage race cars. He's got an old Omni, and I've got my old Fiat. But Robbie kind of grew up with the import nights tuner culture, and then he got more into racing. He had an SR20, a 240. So he had a different background, which I thought was kind of a good balance. He was a little bit more mainstream than we were. So we just sat down one weekend. I got out all the equipment. Most of the equipment we still use. It was stuff that I had from my dad working in film and video, and then from me working in the retail music business. And we just recorded an episode, and it was an hour and a half long. And we had originally intended to record maybe 5 episodes and kind of see if it was something that we could do and if it made sense or if it just needed a ton of editing and it was a mess. But it turned out really well. We didn't edit it at all. We just released it as our first episode. And if you go back and listen to our first episode, which is still on iTunes and Google, I mean, it's basically just unedited. It's a single audio file. There's no intro music. There's no nothing. It's just we started talking. And then, you know, over the past, how long we've been doing this now? 2 years, we've just kind of refined things and changed things as we've moved forward. I think for a lot of people, you'll see that, you know, you see guys that have 300 episodes or they have 300 videos or whatever. And you look at that video and I think people can look at it and go, I don't know if I can do that, but that's not the point. The point is, can you do something and then try to refine it and get better at it? Because every time we do something, the first time we do it, it's not that great, you know, and you have to start with something. You have to start with what you have and then try to move forward with it and see if you can improve it and then just do it consistently. That's the other big one.
Yeah, that's exactly what my channel is. Like, if you look at my older stuff, it's like complete terribleness, shitty camera. Now
Yeah.
it's like it's getting better and better and better. But enough about me. This is about you. So if you had any advice to give someone who either wants to start a podcast or has one and isn't like either seeing much luck with it or just wants to make their podcast better.
Yeah.
Like, what advice would you give someone who's either trying to do a podcast or already has one?
I've been lucky enough to have people ask me that question, which means that we must be doing something right to some extent. You know, and to me, I don't really see it as us doing anything extraordinary necessarily. But what I try to tell people is you need to do it consistently, because typically when people ask me, like, okay, I have a podcast and it's not got the subscribers that I want, or I have, you know, whatever YouTube channel or whatever, it doesn't really matter what it is. It's like, I don't have it's not what I want it to be. I don't have the audience that I want. I usually ask them first, how often do you release something? And well, you know, it kind of depends. It depends on, you know, if I'm available or not to do this or whatever. But if you really want to have a good channel or a good podcast, and you want people to subscribe to it, you want people to patronize you, basically, you want them to view whatever it is that you're putting out there, it has to be consistent. So just choose whatever you think is realistic from a consistency standpoint. You know, I'd even tell people, if you can't do it weekly, just do it every other week, but you have to do it every other week. Start there. I'd recommend people do it weekly, but start it every other week if that's all you can handle, you know, with your schedule or whatever, and you have to do it. It's that date on your calendar that you can't move.
Yeah, I know one thing, like, I've been trying to schedule my podcast, like, in advance so people know about it. But one thing I come up with is, like, with doing it weekly is like, I run out of topics sometimes.
Absolutely. And, you know, we've worked on that as 1010's podcast. What we've done is we've tried to do kind of more brainstorming scenarios where we sit down and we go, okay, here's a list of dates. We've got these dates coming up. We've got, you know, like right now we've got a list. It's January, February, March. Pick your dates for your show. Ours is always on Wednesday. So put whatever that date is for Wednesday down. Leave a blank there or put something next to it. Go to the next date and just list out all those dates for 3 months, and then make a list of topics and try to start fitting those topics in, and then go, okay, who do I want to talk to? You know, because our show's not interviews every week. So we have to choose topics that we want to do. And then you have to decide who do I want to interview? Then make a list of people you want to interview and start contacting those people. So it's just a matter of, when you can approach it that way, kind of more structured, we've had a lot better luck of being able to remove that anxiety of what are we going to talk about? Because there was definitely times when we were doing the show, even 6 months ago, where we're like, we don't even know what we're going to talk about. We have a show in 3 days. It's on the calendar. We have to do it because it's the only time that all three of us are available, and we don't have a topic. So doing it that way has made it so much easier.
What made you want to get your Fiat that you mentioned earlier?
That is an interesting question. So I think the first car I drove was a Fiat. I think it was an 81 Fiat that we had gotten for free because it wouldn't. I don't know exactly what the issue was. I think it had a fuel pump problem, but the guy, he had it in his yard or something. He just didn't want it anymore. So he gave it to us and we fixed it. We had it going in an afternoon, and I think I was only like 12 or something. And that was the first car that I drove, and it was not all the Fiats, but most of them were manuals, and this one was a manual. So I think I learned how to drive a manual on the Fiat. If it wasn't that, it was a 70 GMC pickup. But that was kind of always, you don't really forget those types of experiences, those really, you know, young automotive impressions. So I kind of had that imprinted on my mind. And then when it came time to, when I turned 19, I was taking a semester off because of college, because I was working at the time. I had an extended internship that was 9 months or something. So I wasn't in school, and I was bored, but I didn't want to build hot rods anymore necessarily, or muscle cars. I want to do something different. So I was like, well, I'll try autocross and see if that works for me. And then I went back to, okay, I have this experience with the Fiat. It's similar to a Miata, but it's different. And I always seem to choose the weird path. So I was like, okay, I'll choose the weird path again, and I'll get another Fiat. So I bought the one that I have now. It'd be almost 10 years ago. So we've had it 9 years. Got it in like a box of parts. It was the car and then a box of crap, including the brakes. I mean, it was completely in pieces. The guy had tried to restore it. He had done some paint to it, which wasn't great. It wasn't terrible, but it really wasn't that good either. I've just covered it in decals now, which solves that problem. But and we threw that together in about 6 weeks, I think. So we put it together pretty quickly, and just whatever parts and tires. And I didn't have a clue what I was doing for autocross, but I went out there and did it, and it was a good time. I mean, I still do it on occasion. I've kind of moved more towards drifting, and I want to move more towards more track days or time attack or whatever. But yeah, I mean, I still use it. I used it all last season. It was a great car.
Earlier, you mentioned to me that you have an RX-7. You want to tell us
Yep.
a little bit about that and why you got it and what the purpose for that car is?
Yeah, so got the RX-7 because the Fiat was, I guess it's not aftermarket friendly. Everything needs to be fabricated. There's some parts that are hard to get that you have to have imported. Everything is slow. I mean, if you want to find a specific part, it might take you 6 weeks just to get it. It's painful. So I wanted something different. It was actually originally meant for track days only. I wanted something different. I was looking at a Z06. I looked at just some regular C5 Corvettes. I kind of thought about a C4 Corvette. I think I thought about some Trans Ams, but I was like, I don't really want to go down that route again. I want to do something a little bit different. I want to build something. So this RX-7 came up on Craigslist. It's an 86, so that would make it an FC. That'd be the first year of the FC. It was a car that had previously been a drag car, so it had previously had an LS in it. There was no motor in it when I bought it. It was a roller. So bought it, got it home, tried to figure out what to do with it, and just decided I want to see if I can build a decent car kind of affordably, cheaply. You know, I was going to put another V8 in it because that's my background. It's actually got an LT1, not an LS1 in it, and a T56. So that's just, I mean, that build just kind of progressed over the course of 2 years. I originally didn't have a plan other than I wanted a V8 and a manual, and it was supposed to be a track car, and now it's a drift car. So right now I'm in the process of putting a cage in it. The whole thing about this car is it's been a learning experience. Anytime I could do something myself instead of paying someone to do it, I've done it. So I built the first exhaust system I ever built or fabricated. I did on this car. This is my first roll cage. It's made from, you know, all the tubing is to spec for Formula Drift. It's being fabricated by me, but it was pre-bent by Jegs, and then I'm going to have a certified welder weld it. So I'm not crazy enough to try to weld in my own cage, but I'll tack it together and have somebody weld it. So it's been a really good experience to learn more about cars, and you know, I'll continue to grow and build on top of that as I do other projects, or I continue to modify this one.
So what was your first car?
The first car was the Thunderbird. I think it was an '89. It was my dad he's an electrician, commercial. Now he's kind of more of a commercial electrician, but he was working at this guy's house in Des Moines, and he had this car, and he asked if he wanted it because he knew my dad was into cars. And it really wasn't anything. It was an automatic '89 Thunderbird. That was the first year for that body style. I have no idea what they call that chassis or that body style, but it was supposed to be, when the guy ordered it, he had it since new. It was supposed to be a supercharged version. For some reason, they didn't send him the supercharged one, which I would have been pissed about. I would have sent it back, but he took delivery of it still. And yeah, it was kind of it just didn't work. I don't remember what was wrong with it. It had a lot of electrical problems. So we went through and fixed a lot of things, and I drove it. Did I really drive it? I don't know if I did, because I would have been 12 at that time. So I don't think I really drove it. I think we just kind of flipped it. But it was my car. It was my project. And then I got the Camaro. And then after that, I had a Bravado, which is basically a Blazer.
So how did you get a hold of the Camaro? Because, I mean, was that the first car you really actually started driving on and stuff like that?
Well, that's interesting, because I got the Camaro when I was 13. I think I just turned 13. So I got it. It was not in great condition. It needed a lot of body work. The engine was okay. It's out of a pickup. It's out of like a 70s pickup. We did the date code check on it to see. I think it's from a 74 C10 or something. So it ran fine. It just had typical rust. You know, rear rocker panels were pretty rusted. Floors were okay, but not great. Had some dents and dings. The paint didn't look very good. So I I wanted to leave it alone, but my dad, he decided that he wanted to tear into it, so we started doing all the body work on it because he wanted to. But it was a really good experience. Again, it was a great learning experience because, you know, at 13, obviously I'd never done any body work, I'd never done any Bondo, I'd never done any welding, I'd never done any, you know, seaming, none of that stuff. That was all new. So I didn't have a clue what I was doing, but I learned a lot during that time, and it took 2 years to finish it. Just because we didn't work on it super fast, and we did everything. I mean, we put the panels, we cut the old panels out, put the new panels in, did any fiberglass work that was required to hide the seams. There's a tiny bit of Bondo, but not much, and painted it in a shop. We built kind of our own little paint booth out of plastic and 2x4s, and shot the whole thing. And yeah, so I got that right about the time I would have started driving back and forth to school on my permit. So
I'd say Camaro would be a good first driving car.
it was good, but in retrospect, I don't know if I'd let my own. I don't have kids, but if I had kids, I don't know if I would buy them a V8 Camaro, you know what I mean, for their first car when they're 15. The thing when I was in high school, I can remember a lot of people had decent cars, you know, that maybe not that caliber of car, but, you know, nicer. One kid had one of the all-wheel drive turbo Evos. I don't know if that was a GSR, I can't remember, but you know, it's amazing to me that I didn't wreck my car, I guess. A lot of other people did. So I don't know if I was a parent, if I would sign off on that as a first car, but it's still in one piece, so I didn't wreck it.
That's a plus. So what was your childhood dream car?
Yeah, so I think my childhood dream car would have been, realistically, was probably a 911, because that would have been the 996 911 or the 959. I think that probably would have been up there at the top. I do remember when I was maybe a little bit younger than that, probably around 12, I had a book that was Porsche, like it was a Porsche book. And, you know, that the 996 at that time would have been, that would have been out for a couple of years at that point. And so that would have been the new best Porsche. And I think for me, a turbo, you know, probably a turbo or a Turbo S would have been my dream car, or the 959, which would have been a lot older by that time.
So at the time of recording, how old are you?
28. Turned 28 3 months ago.
Alrighty. So what is your current dream car? Because I would assume it'd be a little bit different than your childhood dream car.
Yeah, it is. That's an interesting question. You asked me that in the pre-interview, and it's really weird how tastes change. I think my dream car is probably more obtainable. It's a dream. It's an obtainable dream, but I would love some form of Maserati, like a Gran Turismo or something. You know, a fairly new one, or if they ever restyle that car, which that car is way old at this point. It's just outdated. If they ever do a new two-door Maserati, something like that. Just because I love Italian V8 cars. I like the idea of a front engine V8 car instead of, you know, a rear engine Ferrari or something like that. I just don't, for some reason, the Ferraris don't appeal to me as much as the Maseratis do. You know, another one might be an FD RX-7, which seems a little weird, maybe because it's totally obtainable, but a really clean one to me is a really special car. People are going to hate me because I'm not a rotary fan, so I'd totally put a V8 in it. But, you know, it's my dream car, so everybody can
do it with what you want.
Yeah, exactly. So
it's your car, so you can do with it as you wish.
Exactly. So, and maybe an S15, like a V8, a really clean V8 swapped S15 might be one too. It's just weird. I mean, even, you know, you can get Gran Turismos for reasonable money. I mean, if you really wanted to get one, you know, an average Joe could save up and take out way more money in a loan than they should, but they could afford it. You know what I mean? So, you know, no crazy Maserati MC12s or Ferrari Enzos or LaFerraris or anything like that for me. Those don't appeal to me as much as some of that other stuff. Some of it I do like, but I think if I'm going to spend much time thinking about it, like saying, okay, this is my dream car, I really want this, I actually want to be able to afford it without having a weird windfall that I'm not aware of that's coming my way, you know? That to me is more of a dream. The other thing's more of a fantasy.
And plus another thing with exotics is like there's so much more money to maintain as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why,
Like an oil change on a Lamborghini is probably like $1,000 most likely or more. I don't know the exact prices, but it's probably up there.
and that's, and my thing too is that if I'm going to have a dream car, this is my actual dream car. I want to be able to work on it. So, um, because I don't even trust people to change my oil, which is, I realize, kind of crazy, but every time I've done an oil change after somebody else has done my oil change, I see something weird, like they've over torqued something, or I
Or
can't
they
get the
didn't
oil
put the
filter
oil
off.
filter on, or they didn't put it on tight enough, or
Yeah,
it's
usually
on
they
too tight, or
over torque everything. I've had to shove a screwdriver through an oil filter before because I don't have oil filter wrenches because I don't tighten my oil filters that tight. So yeah, I want to be able to work on my stuff. That's part of the dream too. Is if I'm gonna have a dream car, I kind of want to build it and have the process of building it into
yeah.
exactly what I want. So that's part of the dream. It's not just going out and literally turnkey, like, here's your car and this is all
Yeah,
you get.
plus you get that special feeling after working on a car and it goes right.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you can have the flip side of it too, which I've had a lot of that, which is just utter despair trying to figure out
Yeah.
why it's not working. But that's the process. And it gets better too. Even a year ago, me working on something didn't go as smoothly as me working on it now. I've learned so much in just the course of a year that it gets better and better and better. And then I can look at something and go, okay, I want to try that now. I
Yeah.
want to try building this, and I can use this experience to help me do that. So it's all just part of the whole experience.
So what's the story on your first ticket?
My first ticket I got in the Camaro, and it's not exciting at all. And I apologize. So I was going through an area of town that is apparently a speed trap.
Mm.
I probably should have known it was a speed trap. I knew I was speeding, but there was a speed limit change. I think it went from something. I think it went from 45 to 35, and I knew I was doing 55, but I didn't see the speed limit change. And the guy caught me, and he was not in this. He was not specifically waiting for somebody. He just happened to have his radar on and saw me blow through there. And he stopped me and he asked me some questions. He's like, "Hey, it's a nice car." I was like, "Oh, I appreciate it." I was cooperative. And he's like, "So how fast were you going?" He's like, "I'm pretty sure I was doing 55." And he's like, "Yeah, you were doing 56." I was like, "Oh, okay." He's like, "You know what the speed limit is?" "Pretty sure it's 45." He's like, "Well, it's actually 35." I was like, "Okay, great." So I just got done doing 21 over. That's not a good look. So, but he wrote the ticket down. It really wasn't. It's not really that exciting of a story, but that's my only speeding ticket. I've been pulled over for stupid stuff like tint and front license plates, which in the state of Iowa you have to have a front license plate. Well, it's not that way all places, but um, yeah, I get pulled over for dumb stuff. I try not to do anything too crazy on the street. I try not to even drive my race cars on the street, which is really boring. It's kind of like anti YouTube culture too, because YouTube's a lot about street racing and doing crazy crap like that. But I've got a drift car now, so I don't I don't have to do it on the street. I can do it on the track.
Yeah. So how did you get into the car scene in your hometown?
Car scene, and so maybe it's different other places, but we had a decent car scene at the high school. So you just kind of got into the car scene by having a cool car in high school because there wasn't that many of us. So I mean, that was your only ticket to entry, was having a cool car and not being a dick. You can come hang out with people. I mean, that's the truth. And so if you had a cool car, you met new people that also had cool cars. And I was probably the odd man out because at the time, let's see, when I was in high school, it would have been 2005 would have been the first year. So I think Tokyo Drift came out in 2005. Pretty sure
I
it
think it was
did.
something like that.
So it still was Fast and the Furious culture. Like I said, my buddy had that Eclipse. People had, I don't think anybody had an Evo, but there were a lot of people with Eclipses. There were a lot of people with Lancers. That was kind of, and I grew up in a town that wasn't like wealthy or anything like that. So, that was kind of the stuff we had. There were guys with trucks. There were guys with newer Camaros, like maybe not fourth gen Camaros, but third gen Camaros. So that was, you just come hang out and you're cool, and you had kind of like a designated parking area in the high school, and then after high school I left left my hometown. It's not far from here. It's only 30 miles. No, 20 miles. But after that, I went out across the state and went to college. So, and I couldn't really take a car with me when I moved. So that was a bummer. All I had was my daily.
So what's the car culture like in the area you live in now?
Yeah, the car culture here is a little weird. We tried to do as much as we can for the local car scene, but it's a little weird, and it's kind of hard to explain how it's weird. But people don't really want to pay to play, I guess I would say. You know, you go to different events in different places, and you go to car shows, and it may be $30 to enter or whatever, but people build really crazy cars, and there's just kind of a great culture around the car show scene and all that. Here, there's not really much of that. People want to go to Cars and Coffee, or they want to go to free meetups or whatever, and the car culture here is a little bit disjointed. There's not a ton of unity, which is really a bummer, because people just don't get together to do car things here. There are a ton of people that do car stuff, but the show guys and the street guys, there's just a lot of different factions, and they don't really play well with one another. I'm a big small block fan. It's a little hard to see because my mic stands in front of it, but that's Chevrolet. So I'm not really a huge Chevrolet fan. I don't really buy their cars. I just really like their engines, so I put their engines in other stuff. But if I had to pick a brand, I'm kind of a GM guy. I like Cadillac. I like all the V series stuff. So
if you could drive another YouTuber's car for a year, whose car would you pick and why?
That is an interesting question, and the reason I say that is because I'm probably the odd man out. I don't watch a lot of YouTube. I mean, I do, but not excessive amounts of YouTube. So I was trying to think of whose car I would pick. I would probably pick something in the Mighty Car Mod stable, and actually Moog's old. He had I'd probably pick the 240 he had a 180. I think it was a 180 SX. I'd probably pick his 180. I'm on a Nissan kick lately. I don't really know why. I think I'd really like to have an Infiniti, like a G37 or a G38. That's probably gonna be my next car. If I can, because it's probably gonna end up being a drift car at some point. So once I retire it from daily duty, it can go be a drift car. But so yeah, I'm just on a Nissan kick. So something Nissan related. He had a super, super, super clean S15 that he had to sell because he lost a bet to Marty. I think he lost a race to his Subaru. I think that's what it was. So that's probably what I would choose. I'd probably choose that, whatever happened to that super clean S15 that he had imported.
So what all cars have you owned in your lifetime?
So I'll probably have to go through a little bit chronologically, but I had the Thunderbird, I had the Camaro, I had the Bravada, which is an Oldsmobile Blazer, more or less. I had a Sebring Coupe, which was a terrible car. I think the reason I bought it was because I was having problems with the Bravada. It had a lifter issue, which now I probably would have just run it till it died. But at the time, I was like, this is going to lead to catastrophic failure, and I'm going to be screwed. So I got rid of it. Got this Sebring because it was low miles. It was the coupe. It was the one that Mitsubishi made. So Mitsubishi made these for a while. It was actually built on the Eclipse platform. It was a terrible car. I never should have bought it. I didn't keep it very long. Then I had a VR6 GTI, which was simultaneously a great car and a terrible car. It was a great car to drive when it worked. It had a lot of problems, though. Probably the first year or so I owned it, it was okay. But after that, it had tons of electrical problems. It had a problem where the fan relay, so the relay that runs the cooling fans for the radiator, it died. And as a result, the air conditioner stopped working. So the issue that I saw was the AC doesn't work. Okay, what could possibly be wrong with the AC? It has nothing to do with the AC. It had to do with the fans. So it was crap like that it was a nightmare. Actually, before that, I had the GTI. I had an Audi A6, which was plagued with similar problems. It was a really nice and a really comfortable car, and there's a lot of stuff I liked about it. But same stupid crap. It at one point would stop going into reverse. it was like a small electrical switch. You replace it and it would start working again, but you had to take it to the dealership to have them reset the code on the ECU for the transmission, which you could not do yourself. So that was like a $400 trip to the dealership for almost no reason.
Good Lord.
Yeah. So I had the Audi, then I had the GTI, then I had the Veloster Turbo, which I actually really liked that car. It was a great car. I had almost no problems with it, other than a couple like small things that were covered under warranty. I wish it was a little bit faster, like just a tad, but it was a great daily. It was a great car, actually. Then I got a wild hair and decided I really wanted Trailblazer SS. Like I had to have one, so that's what I have now. I've got a Trailblazer SS with the LS2. I've got the all-wheel drive version. It's a 2007, and that's actually been a really great vehicle. I really haven't had many problems with it. It's stock. I don't modify my dailies as a rule. As soon as they're retired from being dailies, it's free game. But keep them stock. Stay stock, stay happy.
I mean, it's got an LS in it, and they're pretty reliable.
It's got an LS3. It's 400 horsepower. You can put that LS3 will take a cam. It'll take a really aggressive cam and make just a ton of power. You can get 500 horsepower out of just a cam swap on that motor. But you're gonna blow up the transmission because for some reason GM put those 4L70Es in there, and they're just not designed to handle any additional horsepower because it's basically a 4L60E, I think, with a different third gear. Something about the third gear has been reinforced, but it's not meant to take. It's hardly meant to take the stock power that it has. So people always say, "Oh, those transmissions are unreliable." It's like, well, no. People put too much power through them and blow them up relatively easily. That's the problem.
Yeah.
So that's
I mean, I highly doubt GM planned like, oh, we're gonna make this Trailblazer. Like, nobody's gonna want to modify it. It's an SUV kind of thing.
Yeah. They didn't think
who the hell's gonna modify an SUV? So we'll just put this shitty transmission that won't handle anything more than what it has.
Yeah, people take them drag racing. I mean, you can't do that. And that's the thing that people don't understand is you cannot take an all-wheel drive car and take it to a prepared drag strip with I don't even know, because I don't drag race. I don't know what that stuff is that they put down, that tacky stuff.
The prep stuff?
Yeah, you can't put an all-wheel drive car on that and not have problems.
What would your dream garage be? Like, if money wasn't an object, what would your dream garage be?
Dream garage. So I'd probably include all the dream cars. I'd probably have a Maserati. I'd definitely have an FD. I'd have an S15. If money wasn't a problem, I probably would start reaching up into some of the supercars. I'd probably have a McLaren because I respect a lot of what McLaren's doing right now as a company. There's something really appealing about their engineering and their design. So maybe a 720S. Or, I mean, you could say a P1 if you could find a P1. Someone would sell you a P1. That'd be pretty sick. But I like the 720S because it's pretty close to the power output of the P1's gas motor without any of the electrical motors. So that's pretty cool. It's just stupidly fast too, and you could still kind of drive it daily, relatively reasonably. I think I would have a V12 Aston Martin too. Maybe I'd even do like some sort of vintage Vantage or something like that, 90s Vantage.
I know the DBS was always one that I always liked was the DBS.
Yeah, there's some sort of character about the Aston Martins that's cool, especially the V12 cars.
Yeah.
It's really appealing. So I'd probably have an Aston Martin. Daily driver, I'd probably have maybe a Linienfelter Tahoe or something stupid like that, a supercharged LS Tahoe or, a GMC Yukon or something like that, just to tear around in. I'd probably have to have a Maserati Gran Turismo too, the Quattroporte. They've got the all-wheel drive ones now. They've got the twin turbo V8. That'd be a pretty sick daily. It would be a lot of probably Italian and British cars with a bunch of LS or LT stuff sprinkled in. So again, I like working on my stuff. So if I had the space, you know, to have all that crap, I would definitely have a bunch of cars that I would personally be working on.
What's some sketchy things you have done in a car?
Some sketchy things I've done in a car. I've not done a lot of sketchy stuff on the street, but I did take the Fiat and I put, so it's a 74 124 Fiat. I put a welded diff in it, and I made some other changes to the car to get it ready for this. And I took it drifting, and I took it drifting at a track, and I had an instructor, he was a friend, somebody that had been on our show, in the car, and we did drift it. And the more I thought about it, the more I thought that this is some Italian designer is rolling over in his grave right now that I'm attempting to drift this Fiat. But we did it, and it worked fine. And he actually said, he's like, it feels a lot like a KA 240. It's got a lot of, it's, you know, kind of similar power to weight ratio, size. It's just a little underpowered car, and it takes a lot of technique to drift those types of cars. It takes a lot of clutch kicking and tossing it in, and so you struggle with, you know, keeping the power on and being able to maintain a slide because it wants to hook up because you don't have much power. So then you got to clutch kick it, and so that's probably the weirdest thing I've done, sketchiest thing I've done in a car. You know, most of my time's been spent racing or trying not to get a ticket. So
some interesting encounters you've had with cops? Any?
No, not really. I've not had a bunch of interesting encounters with cops.
I mean, that's kind of a good thing.
It's kind of a good thing. I had that one encounter. I tried to be pretty nice about what happened. I did, you know, I was trying to be nice because that's going to get you a lot farther. When I got those, I was pissed about that front plate ticket. God, I was mad about that, and the tint ticket, because I just bought that car too, and there wasn't, I wasn't going to put the front plate on it, and I wasn't going to fix the tint, but then I got a ticket for it about a month after I bought it. That was on a GTI, and I was super pissed about that, but I just had to grin and bear it. So,
did you say you just bought it too?
Yeah, I just bought it, I think a month before, and it was December, and the guy was like, he was telling me about all these, you know, deficiencies or whatever, defects with my car, and I was like, yeah, well, I just bought this a month ago. So he's like, well, it says here you bought it October 31st. I'm like, okay, well, if you're gonna be pedantic about it, yes, I bought it 5 weeks ago, not just a month ago, but sure. So it was a speed trap, and I wasn't speeding, and I think he was pissed, and he was trying to write me any sort of ticket that he could come up with. So
I'm guessing it was quota time of the month.
It must have been. It was a pretty big speed trap too. They had tons of cars lined up, and I don't even know why I got pulled over, because he couldn't tell me how fast I was going. So
he probably just pulled you over because he couldn't get anybody for speeding, and he was like, fuck it, I'll get this guy. He has.
Everybody else had been alerted to the speed trap but me, and then there was, you know, some kid in a GTI with tint that was too dark, and so I was the target. So I've always tried to know the stuff that's going to get me pulled over and try to fix it, especially after that. So even the Camaro has a front plate on it. The RX-7 has a front plate bracket, but I don't run it because it's not really street legal, so I don't drive it on the street, but I could put a plate on it. So I just try to not get into that situation. And typically if I take a car to a car show, mine is probably the least, it sticks out the least, I'll put it that way, to a cop, of having some sort of weird deficiency. So, but yeah, I try to just avoid, I don't need that in my life, so I just avoid it in general.
Eyes Up Auto Art.
Oh yeah, it's Zach.
What's
up, buddy?
He asks, when is the next Ask Me Anything podcast?
So we have a very interesting listener group. Zach has been very loyal to the show for a long time. I'm very appreciative.
That's actually how I found you guys. Actually, was through Zach.
Was through Zach? Okay. So
yeah,
Zach's a good dude.
Yeah, he is.
So our show has kind of been based on like guys talking, just guys having a conversation about cars. Like guys would talk about cars. You know, we give each other shit and we go back and forth or whatever. But it's created a weird culture of people making more jokes than talking about cars, which is totally fine. It's not the end of the world by any means. but we've done these Ask Me Anythings because, you know, we were like, oh, people on Reddit do it. Let's try it, see what happens. The first one went fine. There were a few jokes and things in there or whatever. The second, I think it was the second one. We done 3 or 2. I don't know. Anyway, the last one we did was a complete disaster. It had nothing to do with cars. People were just making jokes and trying to set up punchlines, and it was pretty funny. But I don't know if we'll do it again. I'm sure people enjoyed it, but if you were a new listener, you were probably completely lost. So don't start on that episode.
What was your first job?
First job, I worked at a music store in my hometown, and by music store I mean guitars, drums, basses, you know, stuff like that. It was more rock and roll band instruments than anything else. And that's how I got the equipment to do this. Was, you know, I've got mixers and I've got amps and guitars and all that stuff we don't use for this, obviously. But I you know, came from that audio engineering background because the guy that worked there was an audio engineer, and I think he had worked for, he may have worked for BB King and a few other people, some decent names, and he had traveled for a while. And so that was just, you know, that was the type of store that they ran there, where it was big live music events. They supported that stuff, sold equipment for it. And that was my first job. So I worked there 5 years, I think, selling guitars, selling PA gear. It was a great job. Unfortunately, I couldn't do it forever. Short of buying the store or something like that, it just wasn't realistically a long-term job. But
Yeah.
it was great while I did it. It was great in high school. It was great for the first year or so of college. I mean, I even drove back from college to work there on the weekend because, you know, I made okay money, and it was worth it to me to come back and, you know, work there a couple days a week. So it was fun. It was a really good job.
You could have one of your previously owned vehicles for a week. What would it be and why?
So I would have previously owned. I haven't sold much for this very reason. But I probably have the GTI back. I really did enjoy that car. At the time, though, I was broke and really couldn't afford to keep dumping several $100s a month into it, and that's what I was having to do to keep it going. And so I traded that off on the Veloster. But I probably have that back. It'd be nice to have that back and do some proper mods to it, and maybe build kind of a fun street car. Put some wide tires on it, try to get a little bit more horsepower out of it, put, you know, some forcing suspension on it, or BCs or something like that, and get it not stanced, but get it sitting right, get the fitment, you know, looking really good, and you know, do a cat back, because those VR6s sound awesome with exhaust mods. But yeah, it was a car that I really enjoyed. I just couldn't afford it, so I had to get rid of it. So that's what I'd have back.
Some cool things you have experienced from doing the podcast. Like, what's some opportunities that came up from doing, like, being known from the podcast, like, that you wouldn't have gotten that experience without the podcast being around?
Yeah, the podcast has done a lot for me. I'm appreciative of it from that perspective. I can usually get, you know, media, or I've never been turned down for media credentials. I'll put it that way. So I go to the Chicago Auto Show as media. I go to the Grid Life events, and we know the guys that do Grid Life extremely well. And so I can usually get, media, and sometimes I get staff, which I don't know what that gets me, but I have a staff wristband, so whatever. We've had, you know, preferential parking, stuff like that, which is really nice at those huge events. But Grid Life's been a big one, been exposed to that. You know, I've had great reception from the guys that drift in Omaha, which is pretty close to Des Moines, a couple hours away. You know, and so you just get into events, you get different privileges. It's, you know, it's nice. I try to also check my privilege also and realize that, you know, the channel has grown, the podcast has grown, it's done really well, but I also don't want to become the guy that is unrelatable to. So I try to keep that in mind, that because I don't want to name any names, but you see people that as their channel grows or things progress, that their attitudes towards things change, and what they do changes, and the types of cars they review change, and their opinions of other types of cars change. And so I try to be cognizant of that, because I think it's important to remember it. You know, even even now when we do stuff, our main focus is the podcast. We've got some subscribers on YouTube, but we really don't spend a ton of time on that, actually produce content for it. Now we are starting to, but we haven't in the past. But you think that you're big shit, and then somebody checks you on it, and you realize that you need to not have that attitude. And that'll happen throughout your whole life, though. I mean, you'll find someone that's makes more money or is bigger, has a bigger reach than you, or has this or whatever, or blah blah blah. And so it's important to stay humble.
Matt Rosenthal asks, least favorite car you've ever driven?
Least favorite car I've ever driven will either be a PT Cruiser or a Smart. I think it was a 4.2. I don't have a clue. It was a smart car. It was awful. Worst transmission ever. Would not shift gears. It's a single clutch automated transmission. It was just awful.
Plus, I think that's a 3-cylinder engine, isn't it?
Yeah, it probably is. So that's my worst.
Winchester wants to know S15 or 180SX?
Good question. S15.
Why?
The interior on them is really nice. It's really clean. I like the overall design. I like the front end design. Running gear, transmission, engine, all that stuff's getting thrown out anyway, so it doesn't matter. But it's purely aesthetics for me. It's just a better looking car to me. And that's not to say the 180 is not good looking, because it's fantastic looking. It's just I think the S15 is just that little bit better.
Gregory Salvatore wants to know, what year was your first Camaro you were talking about?
So I've got a 79, which is a second gen. It's light blue. Is the GM color code is light blue. It is a Z28. It did not have the original engine transmission with it when I got it, but it's still the original light blue color. It doesn't have the decal package, which this little ornament that Zach gave me, I'll show you guys. This is an orange one. You can see it's got the stripes and stuff. It's got hood stripes. These actually aren't original, but they're similar to where the stock ones would be. I don't have any of that decal package on mine anymore. But yeah, 79, 350 transmission.
Okay, Linchester wants to know, what will be a nice car for drifting or hooning around for you?
For me, personally, what will be a nice car? I think I do want a G35. I think I want a G35. It's got a lot of the parts from the 350Z suspension-wise. So, and there's a lot of aftermarket support for it. I may even do a 4-door. We'll see. I would love a Genesis Coupe, but I talked to he's a Pro 1 driver, and he said that one of his sponsors built a Genesis Coupe as a show car, and the rear end, I don't know what it is exactly, but something about the rear end geometry is weird. So they end up having to refabricate a lot of the suspension points, and I don't want to do that. I mean, it would be a learning experience, but it's not one that I really want to do.
What's your current job that you have?
Yeah, so I'm a project manager. I've held a couple different project manager roles now, but I work for a mechanical company. So we do large commercial projects, anything from design build to spec build, which means either we design it or somebody else designs it and then we build it. But I manage commercial projects from start to finish, basically from the whole bidding design process to close out and hand over the building to the owner. So I do a lot of specialty stuff, labs, really large retail space. What else have I worked on? I've worked on some automotive tech schools, actually. That's my automotive tie-in. I've done some work on automotive tech schools, paint booths, exhaust recirculation systems, welding labs, stuff like that.
All right, Novitaz wants to know, what is your favorite project car currently?
My favorite project car, that's a tricky one. That's a hard one between the Fiat and the RX-7. I like the RX-7 a lot because it's easy to work on, but it's pretty common, relatively. The Fiat's a little trickier, takes more skill and more time, and there's kind of some reward to that when you get a project done. But if I had to choose, it's probably the RX-7 because I'm trying to learn certain skills, and they're easier on that car. Like, for instance, the cage, you can buy a pre-bent hoop, the roll hoop. You can buy that pre-bent to the correct size, and then you just have to fabricate the rest of it. And that, that makes that easier because you don't need a tubing bender. Can't do that with a Fiat. So RX-7. But, that's really it, and that's what our show's about too. Is about guys talking about cars, what they're learning about cars, mainstream cars. We'll talk about Corvettes. We'll talk about, the new Lamborghini SUV. We go through the news and all that stuff. It's just really a dive into what normal people do when it comes to cars. We just happen to drift or do track days or autocross. Um, that's our background. And
Would you ever try drag racing?
I would actually. That's why I thought maybe I might build the Camaro into a drag car. It's just a matter of funds, and time.
Yeah.
It's money's a big one. Money's always a big one.
Oh yeah.
And time sometimes seems to be more scarce depending on what's going on. It's hard to find time to do everything that I want to do. Because I have other interests too. I'm a watch person. I've got other interests. Food, drink, whatever, blah blah blah. I kind of run the whole gamut of tons of weird things that I like, and so for a couple months I didn't do a ton with cars because I was doing other stuff. Doing other things that I enjoy doing that I hadn't had time to do because I was trying to bash the RX-7 together so that we could go drifting, and so I took a couple months off. Now I'm back on to working on the RX-7, but if anybody, especially car people that are watch people, definitely check out my Instagram. That'd be a good spot. You can see some of the stuff I do. It's a weird amalgamation of different things, but that's kind of the long and short of it, really.
Hope everybody enjoyed this. Also, comment down below who you think I should interview next. Do keep in mind some people are harder to get than others. That in mind, and definitely check out 1010's podcast and Michael on Instagram and YouTube and everything else. It'll be linked down in the description.